At my daughter's wedding, my name was suddenly announced. Please welcome the disappointment and housekeeper of the family. Laughter filled the room as my wife clapped in delight. I sat silently, my shoulders shaking as I held back the tears. My daughter took a sip of wine and said, "It's just a joke, lighten up." But then, I stood up holding an envelope.
I woke up early that morning, the kind of early where the sky's still gray and the birds haven't figured out it's time to sing yet. My name's Conrad Hale, and for 25 years, I've been the guy who keeps everything running smooth in this house without anyone really noticing. Today was different, though. It was my daughter Clarissa's wedding day, and I wanted it to be perfect for her. I stood there in our little kitchen, the one with the chipped yellow paint and the fridge that hums too loud, folding napkins into those fancy shapes I'd seen on some TV show years back. I'd practiced for weeks, getting the corners just right, because I figured it'd be my quiet way of showing her I cared. Eloise, my wife, and Clarissa were off at the salon, getting their hair twisted into curls and sipping champagne with Eloise's sisters, giggling like I didn't exist. I didn't mind too much. I'd gotten used to being the background guy, the one who fixes the leaky sink or mows the lawn while they plan their big moments. Love, I'd learned, was about doing the work nobody else wanted to do. The napkins looked good, stacked neat on the counter, and I smiled to myself, thinking how Clarissa might notice them later and know her old man had been part of her day. I brewed some coffee, black and strong, and sipped it slow, watching the clock tick toward the time I'd need to put on my suit. It wasn't new, just a gray one I'd worn to a cousin's funeral a few years back, but it still fit okay. I ironed it myself the night before, making sure the creases were sharp. Eloise had laughed when I told her I wasn't renting a tuxedo, said I'd look out of place next to all the fancy guests, but I didn't care. This was about Clarissa, not me. I thought about her as a kid, how she'd run around the backyard with her pigtails bouncing, calling me daddy, while I pushed her on the swing I'd built from scrap wood. She was 24 now, all grown up and marrying some guy named Trevor who worked in finance and had a handshake that felt like a wet fish. I didn't know him well, but she loved him, and that was enough. I finished the coffee, rinsed the mug, and started loading the car with the stuff they'd asked me to bring. Extra chairs, a box of candles, those napkins. The house felt empty without them, just me and the sound of my own footsteps on the creaky floor. I caught my reflection in the hall mirror, gray hair thinning at the top, lines around my eyes deeper than they used to be, and wondered if anyone would even see me today. But I shook it off. This was Clarissa's moment, and I'd spent my life making sure she had moments like this. I'd worked double shifts at the warehouse, saved every penny I could, even when Eloise spent it on dresses or trips with her friends. I never complained. It was for the family, for the life we'd built. I grabbed my keys and headed out, the morning air cool against my face. The drive to the Rosebridge estate was long, and I kept the radio off, just thinking about how proud I was of Clarissa. She'd gone to college, gotten a good job, and now she was starting her own family. I'd done my part, hadn't I? I pulled up to the venue, a big stone building with ivy crawling up the walls, and started unloading. Some guy in a black vest, probably staff, nodded at me like I was one of them, and I guess in a way I was. I carried the chairs inside, set the napkins on a table near the back, and stood there for a minute, taking it all in. The place was beautiful, all white flowers and shiny floors, and I felt a little swell in my chest. Today was going to be worth it. I'd see my girl happy, and that'd be enough. I adjusted my tie, took a deep breath, and told myself it was time to blend into the crowd like always. Just another day of being the guy who makes it all work. The Rosebridge estate looked like something out of a magazine when I stepped inside for the ceremony. My name's Conrad Hale, and I'm not the kind of guy who belongs in places like this. Big chandeliers dripping with crystals, white orchids hanging everywhere, and a carpet so soft I felt bad walking on it in my old shoes. Clarissa's wedding was happening here, and I'd driven up early, still smelling like the coffee I'd had while folding those napkins back home. The place was buzzing already, guests pulling up in shiny black limousines, women in dresses that shimmered, men in suits that probably cost more than my car. I adjusted my gray jacket, the one Eloise had smirked at, and tried to find my spot. I wasn't in the wedding party, see. Nobody asked me to walk Clarissa down the aisle. Eloise had decided her brother Alden would do it instead, said he'd look better in the pictures with his broad shoulders and that fake tan he's so proud of. I didn't argue. I'd learned a long time ago that arguing with Eloise was like yelling at the wind, pointless and tiring. So I swallowed it down, that little sting in my chest, and found my seat near the back, in the last row next to the wall. They'd stuck me with her cousin Maynard, a guy with 3 teeth left and a voice that carried like a foghorn. He was already talking before I even sat down, going on about how lawn fertilizer was the secret to a good life. I nodded, pretending to listen, while I watched the room fill up. The seats closer to the front were for the important people: Eloise, Trevor's parents, some of Clarissa's college friends who'd flown in from places I'd never been. Me, I was fine back here. I could see everything, and nobody'd notice if my tie was a little crooked. The music started, soft at first, then swelling into something grand, and everyone stood up. I got to my feet too, brushing off Maynard's hand when he tried to pull me down to keep talking. And then there she was, Clarissa, my little girl, gliding down the aisle like she'd been born to do it. Her dress was white and long, trailing behind her, and her hair was all pinned up with flowers. Alden had her arm, grinning like he'd won a prize, and I couldn't help but feel a twist in my gut. That should have been me, I thought for a second, but I pushed it away. She looked happy, and that's what mattered. I'd spent years making sure she had that smile, working late so she could have ballet shoes, driving her to school when the bus broke down, sitting through her piano recitals even when I was dead tired. Alden might have gotten the walk, but I'd gotten her this far. The crowd clapped as she reached Trevor, this tall kid with slick-back hair and a suit that fit him perfect. He took her hand, and they turned to face the minister. I stayed standing a little longer than I should have, just watching her, until Maynard tugged at my sleeve and muttered something about sitting already. I dropped into my chair, the wood creaking under me, and folded my hands in my lap. The ceremony went on: vows, rings, all that stuff, and I kept my eyes on Clarissa the whole time. She didn't look my way, not once, but I didn't expect her to. She was in her world now, and I was just a shadow in it. Maynard leaned over halfway through, his breath smelling like onions, and whispered about how the roses out front needed better pruning. I gave him a tight smile and nodded, wishing I'd brought something to fiddle with: my keys, a pen, anything to keep my hands busy. The minister said something about love and forever, and then it was over. Clarissa kissed Trevor, the room cheered, and I clapped too, quiet and steady, my palms stinging a little from the effort. People started moving, heading out to the reception, and I hung back, letting the crowd thin. Maynard shuffled off to find the bathroom, leaving me alone for a minute. I stood up, smoothed my jacket, and looked at the spot where Clarissa had just been. She was gone now, off with her new husband, and I felt this strange mix of proud and empty. I'd done my job, hadn't I? Built her a life good enough to get her here? I took a deep breath, the air thick with perfume and flowers, and started walking toward the reception hall. My seat there'd probably be just as far back, I figured, but that was okay. I'd see her from a distance, like always, and that'd be enough. The napkins I'd folded were waiting somewhere in there, and maybe she'd notice them. Maybe she'd think of me for a second. I stepped out into the sunlight, the noise of the crowd washing over me, and told myself today was still her day, not mine. I walked into the reception hall at the Rosebridge estate, my shoes clicking on the polished floor, and felt like I'd stepped into someone else's life. My name's Conrad Hale, and I'm not built for places this fancy: tables draped in white cloth, centerpieces taller than my head, and waiters gliding around with trays of champagne like they were part of some ballet. Clarissa's wedding was in full swing now, and I was just trying to find my place in it. I'd spent the morning folding napkins for this, hauling chairs, making sure everything was ready, but nobody'd said a word about that. I didn't expect them to. I checked the seating chart near the door. My name was scribbled in small print, table 12, tucked by the emergency exit like an afterthought. Eloise was up front at the main table, sitting with Trevor's parents, her laugh cutting through the hum of the room. She didn't even glance my way. I made my way over, weaving through people I didn't know, their voices loud with stories about vacations and stock markets. Table 12 had a wobbly leg and a view of the kitchen doors swinging open every few seconds, letting out blasts of heat and the clatter of pots. I sat down, my gray suit feeling tighter than it had that morning, and nodded at the guy next to me, an older fellow with a bow tie who smelled like mothballs. He grunted something about the weather and went back to his bread roll. The band started playing, soft jazz that made the air feel heavy, and I watched the room move around me. Clarissa was out there on the dance floor with Trevor, her dress swirling as they spun. She looked like a princess, and for a second, I forgot where I was, just saw my little girl, the one I'd carried on my shoulders when she was 5, giggling as we pretended she was flying. I smiled to myself, sipping the wine they'd poured me. It was good, sharp and cold, better than the stuff I kept at home. The food came out, roast duck with some kind of sauce, potatoes mashed so smooth they didn't even look real. Mine was cold by the time it got to me, but I ate it anyway, cutting slow and careful, keeping my elbows off the table like my mom taught me. Up front, Clarissa stepped to the microphone, her voice bright as she thanked everyone for coming. I leaned forward, waiting, hoping maybe she'd say something about me. "I want to thank my mom," she said, turning to Eloise, "for everything, for planning this, for being my rock, my best friend." The room clapped, Eloise beaming like she'd won an award. Clarissa went on about Trevor's family, her bridesmaids, even the florist. My name didn't come up. Not once. I sat back, the wine glass sweaty in my hand, and took a long drink. It wasn't a surprise, not really. I'd always been the quiet one, the guy who paid the bills and fixed the car and didn't ask for much. But it stung anyway, like a paper cut you don't see coming. I looked over at Eloise. She was laughing again, her head thrown back, her diamond earrings catching the light. She hadn't looked at me all day, not even when I'd carried in those extra chairs she demanded at the last minute. I wondered if she even remembered I was here. The band picked up, and people started dancing again. I stayed put, watching Clarissa twirl with her new husband, her face glowing. She didn't need me out there, I told myself. She had her mom, her friends, this whole big life I'd helped build but wasn't part of. The duck sat heavy in my stomach, and I pushed the plate away, picking at the napkin I'd folded earlier. It was still perfect, sitting there by my glass. I wondered if she'd seen it, if she'd even care. The guy next to me started talking about his sciatica, and I nodded along, half listening, my eyes drifting back to the main table. Eloise was holding court now, telling some story that had Trevor's mom in stitches. I could have walked up there, said something, made myself seen, but what was the point? They'd just smile and turn away again. I finished my wine, the glass empty too fast, and set it down quiet. The night stretched on, speeches and toast piling up, and I kept my seat, my hands folded in my lap. I was here for Clarissa, I reminded myself, even if she didn't know it, even if nobody did. The music got louder, the lights dimmed, and I sat there by the exit, watching my daughter shine in a world that didn't have room for me. It was fine, I thought. I'd made it this far being invisible. One more night wouldn't kill me. The reception hall at Rosebridge Estate was alive with noise, clinking glasses, laughter, the band swinging into some upbeat tune I didn't recognize. My name's Conrad Hale, and I was still sitting at table 12, the one by the emergency exit, nursing a second glass of wine that didn't taste as good as the first. Clarissa was out there, dancing with Trevor, her white dress catching the light every time she moved. I'd been watching her all night, proud in that quiet way I'd gotten used to, even if she hadn't said my name in her speech. I figured that was just how it went. 25 years of being the guy behind the scenes, and you stop expecting the spotlight. But then the MC grabbed the microphone, and everything changed. He was a young guy, all teeth and slick hair, bouncing on his toes like he was about to announce a lottery winner. "All right, folks," he said, his voice booming over the music. "Before we cut the cake, we've got a very special introduction to make. Please welcome the disappointment and housekeeper of the family, Mr. Conrad Hale." The room exploded with laughter. It hit me like a punch, sharp and sudden, right in the chest. Heads turned, eyes landed on me, some curious, some smirking, a few just confused. I felt my face go hot, the wine glass slippery in my hand. Eloise was up at the main table, clapping with this exaggerated glee, her mouth twisted into a grin that didn't reach her eyes. Clarissa, my daughter, my little girl, she just took a sip of her wine and leaned over to Trevor, muttering something that made him chuckle. I sat there, frozen, the laughter echoing in my ears, louder than the band, louder than anything. My hands started shaking, just a little at first, then harder, and I set the glass down before I dropped it. The MC waved at me, like I was supposed to stand up and take a bow or something, but I couldn't move. My throat tightened up, like someone had wrapped a hand around it and squeezed. I looked at Clarissa again, waiting for her to meet my eyes, to see me, and she did, just for a second. "It's just a joke, Dad," she said, loud enough for me to hear over the noise. Lighten up, like it was nothing. Like I hadn't spent my whole life bending over backwards so she could have this day. The room kept laughing, a few people clapping like it was part of the show, and I felt my shoulders start to tremble. Not from anger, not yet, but from the effort of holding it all in. I'd never cried in front of people, not since I was a kid, and I wasn't about to start now. I clenched my jaw, stared down at the table, at the napkin I'd folded so careful that morning, still sitting there perfect and untouched. The guy next to me, the one with the bow tie, nudged me with his elbow. "Good one, huh?" he said, grinning like we were in on it together. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My mind was spinning, replaying the words, disappointment, housekeeper, like they were branded on me now. I'd worked 2 jobs when Clarissa was little, warehouse shifts and odd repairs on the side, so Eloise could stay home and play perfect mom. I'd scrubbed floors, fixed pipes, driven Clarissa to every lesson and game she ever had, all while Eloise told me I wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't flashy enough for her. And now this. A joke. A big, public laugh at the guy who'd kept it all together. I looked up again, and Eloise was still clapping, slower now, her eyes darting around like she was waiting for the next part of the script. Clarissa was back to talking with Trevor, her head tilted away from me, like I'd already faded out of the picture. The MC moved on, cracking some line about the cake, and the room shifted focus, the laughter dying down. But it didn't leave me. It sat there, heavy, pressing down on my chest. I pushed my chair back, just an inch, the legs scraping loud against the floor, and nobody noticed. I could have walked out right then, disappeared through that emergency exit, and let them have their party without me. But I didn't. Not yet. I stayed, my hands balled into fists under the table, my breath coming short and fast. I'd taken a lot over the years, Eloise's digs, the way she'd parade me around like a trained dog when it suited her, the way Clarissa had started looking past me once she got older. But this was different. This was public. This was my daughter's wedding, the day I'd poured everything into, and they'd turned me into the punchline. I stared at that napkin, the one I'd made for Clarissa, and felt something shift inside me. Not breaking, not yet, but bending hard. I wasn't sure what I'd do next, but I knew I couldn't just sit there and take it forever. The band played on, the room spun around me, and I waited, quiet, for whatever came next. The laughter from that MC's joke still hung in the air like smoke, thick and choking, as I sat there at table 12 in the Rosebridge Estate reception hall. My name's Conrad Hale, and I'd just been called the disappointment and housekeeper of the family in front of a room full of strangers, my wife and my daughter. My hands wouldn't stop shaking, and my chest felt tight, like someone had parked a truck on it. Clarissa's words, "It's just a joke, Dad. Lighten up," kept replaying in my head, sharp and careless, cutting deeper every time. Eloise's fake clapping, the way she'd smirked like she'd planned it, burned behind my eyes. I could have walked out right then, left through that emergency exit 5 feet from my chair, and never looked back. But something held me there. Maybe stubbornness, maybe the part of me that still wanted to be seen, really seen, for once. I took a deep breath, the kind that rattles in your throat, and stood up slow, my chair scraping the floor loud enough to make the guy next to me flinch. My legs felt unsteady, but I didn't care. I reached into my coat pocket, my old gray suit jacket, the one Eloise hated, and pulled out an envelope I'd been carrying all day. It wasn't much to look at, just plain white with a little crease from being folded, but it was heavy in my hand, heavier than it should have been. "If I could have just 5 minutes," I said, my voice coming out stronger than I thought it would, cutting through the hum of the room. Heads turned again, slower this time, not laughing now, but curious. Eloise froze up at the main table, her wine glass halfway to her mouth, her eyes narrowing like she was trying to figure out what I was up to. Clarissa stopped whispering to Trevor and stared at me, her lips parting just a little, like she wasn't sure whether to stop me or let me go. The MC, that grinning kid with the microphone, tried to laugh it off, waving his hand like I was some drunk uncle making a scene. "Oh, looks like we've got a speech incoming," he said, but I stepped forward, closer to the center of the room, and his voice faltered. I wasn't drunk. I wasn't stumbling. I was steady now, steadier than I'd been in years. The band slowed down, the music fading into a soft hum, and the room went quiet. Really quiet, the kind of silence that presses against your ears. All eyes were on me, not as the joke, not as the guy who carried the chairs or folded the napkins, but as something else. A man with something to say. I held up the envelope, my fingers tied around it, and looked out at them, at the guests in their fancy clothes, at Trevor's parents with their pinched faces, at my family who'd spent years pretending I was invisible. "There's something I'd like to read," I said, my voice carrying clear across the hall. "Something real." The MC shifted on his feet, glancing at Clarissa like he was waiting for her to shut me down, but she didn't move. Nobody did. I could feel the weight of their stares, hundreds of them, pinning me in place, but I didn't back off. I'd spent too long backing off, shrinking down, letting them walk over me because it was easier, because I thought that's what love was, taking it, always taking it. Not tonight. I opened the envelope slow, deliberate, letting the sound of the paper crinkle fill the silence. My heart was pounding, loud enough I was sure they could hear it, but my hands were steady now. I pulled out the first sheet, a single page with black ink and a notary stamp, and held it up so they could see it wasn't some scribbled note or a grocery list. It was official, real, mine. I looked at Clarissa, her eyes wide now, and then at Eloise, her face going pale under all that makeup she'd piled on. "You've had your fun," I said, not loud, but firm, like I was talking just to them. "Now it's my turn." The room stayed quiet, waiting, and I felt something shift inside me, not anger, not anymore, but power. For the first time in years, I wasn't the guy in the back, the one they laughed at or forgot. I was the one they couldn't look away from. I didn't know exactly what I'd say next, not word for word, but I knew it'd be the truth. The real truth, the kind I'd buried under years of silence and sweat and swallowed pride. I lowered the paper just a little, enough to see their faces, and started to speak again, my voice filling the space they tried to take from me. This wasn't about ruining anything. This was about claiming what was mine, not the stuff in the envelope, not the money or the deeds, but me, Conrad Hale, the man they'd forgotten until now. The silence in the Rosebridge Estate reception hall was thick, like the air before a storm, as I stood there holding that envelope. My name's Conrad Hale, and I just told a room full of people, my wife, my daughter, all their fancy guests, that I had something real to say. The MC had backed off, his microphone dangling at his side, and the band had stopped playing altogether. Clarissa's eyes were locked on me, wide and unsure, while Eloise sat rigid at the main table, her hands clenched around her wine glass like she could crush it. I didn't flinch. For once, I wasn't going to shrink away. I opened the envelope wider and pulled out the first paper, a deed with my name on it, and held it up high so they could all see the official stamp, the clean lines of ink. "This," I said, my voice steady and loud enough to reach the back of the room, "is a deed for this venue, Rosebridge Estate. I bought it 5 years ago under my company's name." A ripple went through the crowd, murmurs, gasps, a few people shifting in their seats. I kept going. "Every flower you're smelling, every chandelier you're staring at, every glass of champagne you've been drinking, you're standing in what I built." I let that sit for a second, watching their faces change. Eloise's mouth dropped open, just a little, before she snapped it shut, her eyes darting to the people around her like she was worried they'd believe me. Clarissa leaned forward, her hands flat on the table, staring at me like I'd just grown a second head. I didn't stop. I reached into the envelope again and pulled out another paper, this one thicker, with more pages stapled together. "And here," I said, lifting it up, "is the trust fund Clarissa doesn't even know she's had since she was 12. $10,000 a year, every year, sitting there waiting for her. I set it up when I was working those double shifts at the warehouse, when I'd come home with my hands bleeding from loading crates so she could go to that private school." The room was buzzing now, whispers turning into low voices, people turning to each other, pointing at me. I could feel the heat in my face, the blood rushing in my ears, but I kept my eyes on Clarissa. She didn't move, didn't blink, just stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. I lowered the papers a little, enough to look at her straight on, and said, "You might not have seen me, Clarissa. I wasn't the one in the pictures or the speeches, but I was never absent. I was there, every day, making sure you had what you needed." The words came out raw, rougher than I meant them to, but I didn't care. They were true. I turned to Eloise next, her face red now, her lips pressed into a thin line. "And you," I said, pointing the papers at her. "You acted like I was nothing, like I was just the guy who mopped the floors and paid the bills. But this," I waved my hand around the room, at the glittering lights, the polished tables, the whole damn place. "This doesn't happen without me." The murmurs got louder, and I saw Trevor's parents lean in close, whispering something to each other, their eyebrows shooting up. I didn't give them time to figure it out. I reached back into the envelope, my fingers brushing the last paper, but I didn't pull it out yet. I wanted this part to sink in first. 5 years ago," I said, "I started my own company. Quietly, Didn't tell you, Eloise, because you'd have laughed, said I was dreaming too big for a guy like me. Didn't tell you, Clarissa, because I wanted you to have it one day without you thinking it was some kind of bribe. I bought this place, Rosebridge, piece by piece, fixing it up, turning it into what it is now. You're all here because of me, even if you didn't know it. The room was alive now, people talking over each other, some standing up to get a better look at me. I saw Maynard, that cousin with the bad teeth, grinning like he'd just won a bet. I didn't care about him. I cared about the two women in front of me, my wife and my daughter, who'd spent years looking through me like I was glass. So laugh all you want, I said, my voice rising just enough to cut through the noise. Call me the housekeeper, the disappointment, whatever you like. But this, I held up the deed again, then the trust fund papers. This is what I've been doing while you were busy forgetting me. Eloise stood up then, her chair scraping back loud, her face twisted with something between anger and panic. Conrad, sit down, she hissed. But I shook my head. No, I said, simple and firm. I'm done sitting down. Clarissa didn't say anything, just kept staring, her hands trembling a little on the table. I lowered the papers, my chest heaving, and felt the weight of it all, the years, the work, the silence, start to lift, just a little. I wasn't done yet. There was more in that envelope, more they didn't know, but for now, I let them sit with this. I'd given them the wedding, the life, everything, and now they knew it. The Rosebridge Estate reception hall was a mess of noise now, whispers turning into chatter, chairs creaking as people leaned forward, all of them staring at me like I'd just pulled a rabbit out of a hat. My name's Conrad Hale, and I just dropped 2 bombshells, the deed to this place and Clarissa's trust fund, both mine, both built by me while my family laughed me off as nothing. I stood there, the envelope still in my hand, my breath coming fast but steady, and locked eyes with Clarissa. She was pale, her hands flat on the table, looking at me like I was a stranger who'd walked into her wedding uninvited. Eloise was on her feet, her face red and tight, like she was about to explode, but I didn't give her the chance to cut in. I had more to say, and after 25 years of keeping my mouth shut, I wasn't stopping now. You forgot me in your speech, Clarissa, I said, my voice low but clear, slicing through the hum of the room. You thanked your mom, your friends, even the guy who did the flowers, but not me. I'm the one who worked 2 jobs when you were a kid, warehouse days and fixing cars at night, so you could go to that fancy private school. I drove you to every piano lesson, sat in the cold car waiting for you to finish, packed your lunches with those little notes you used to love. I cleaned the house, mopped the floors, fixed the leaks, because your mother wouldn't lift a finger. I turned to Eloise then, her eyes blazing, but I didn't flinch. And you, I said, pointing at her, the papers in my hand shaking just a little, you said I wasn't enough. Not smart enough, not rich enough, not good enough for your big plans. You'd parade me around when it suited you, then shove me in the corner when I didn't fit the picture. But without me, there wouldn't be this life. No school for Clarissa, no vacations for you, no wedding like this. My voice cracked, just once, but I swallowed it down and kept going. I was the foundation, Eloise. Not the housekeeper, not the disappointment, the foundation. The room was dead quiet now. Not even a whisper, just the sound of my own breathing and the faint hum of the chandeliers overhead. Clarissa's eyes were wet, but she didn't cry, didn't move, just stared at me like she was trying to piece together who I was. Eloise opened her mouth, then closed it, her hands gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing holding her up. I could see Trevor out of the corner of my eye, shifting in his seat, looking at Clarissa like he wasn't sure what to do. I didn't care about him. This wasn't about him. This was about me and the 2 people I'd given everything for, the ones who'd turned me into a joke an hour ago. I didn't do it for thanks, I said, looking back at Clarissa, softening my voice a little. I didn't need you to say my name in some speech. I did it because you're my daughter, and I wanted you to have everything more than I ever had. But tonight, when that MC called me out, when you laughed, when you told me to lighten up, it hit me. You didn't just forget me. You didn't even see me. My throat tightened, and I had to stop for a second, take a breath, steady myself. The envelope felt heavy in my hand, the last paper still inside, but I wasn't ready for that yet. I wanted them to hear this first, to feel it. I built this place, I said, gesturing around the hall, at the flowers, the lights, the polished floors. I bought it when the bank was about to take it, fixed it up with my own hands, turned it into something people like you could show off. I didn't tell you because I didn't need the credit. I needed you to be happy. But I'm done being invisible. I'm done letting you think I'm nothing. Eloise finally found her voice, sharp and loud. "Conrad, you're making a fool of yourself," she snapped, stepping around the table, her heels clicking hard on the floor. "This is Clarissa's day, not yours." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman I'd married 25 years ago, the one who'd charmed me with her laugh, who'd turned cold when the money got tight, who'd spent years chipping away at me until I barely recognized myself. "No," I said, calm but firm. "This isn't about her day anymore. This is about the truth. And you don't get to shut me up this time." The crowd was shifting now, some people whispering again, others just watching, their mouths half open. I turned back to Clarissa, my voice dropping low. "I love you, kid. Always will. But I'm not just the guy who folds the napkins. I'm your father. And I deserve better than this." My chest ached, not from anger, but from something deeper, something I'd buried for too long. I held the envelope tight, knowing what was left inside, knowing it'd change everything. But for now, I let the words hang there, let them see me, really see me for the first time in years. The air in the Rosebridge Estate reception hall felt electric, charged with the weight of everything I just said. My name's Conrad Hale, and I'd laid it all out. The deed to this place, Clarissa's trust fund, the years I'd spent building their lives while they laughed me off as nothing. I stood there, the envelope still in my hand, my heart pounding but my feet planted firm. Clarissa was staring at me, her eyes wet and wide, like she didn't know what to say. Eloise was on her feet, her face a mix of fury and panic, her voice cutting through the silence a moment ago with that sharp, "You're making a fool of yourself." But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. She stepped closer, her heels snapping against the floor, and tried again. "Conrad, this is embarrassing. Sit down and stop ruining Clarissa's wedding." Her words were loud, meant for the room as much as me, and I saw a few heads nod, like they agreed this was my fault. Clarissa muttered something under her breath, her voice tight. "Can you not ruin my wedding, Dad?" That hit me harder than Eloise's glare, like a knife twisting in my gut. Ruin it? After everything I'd given her? I looked at them both, my wife, my daughter, and felt the years of silence boiling up inside me. "Ruin it," I said, my voice rising, not yelling but strong, filling the space. "This isn't a ruin. This is a reckoning. The truth's been waiting long enough, and I'm tired of carrying it alone." The room went still again, the chatter dying out, every eye back on me. I reached into the envelope one last time, my fingers closing around the final paper. I pulled it out slow, holding it up so they could see the bold print across the top. "This," I said, my voice steady as steel, "is a notice of separation. I'll be filing for divorce on Monday. Everything I own, my business, this estate, the cars, the cabin, it's all in my name. Not ours, Eloise. Mine." A gasp swept through the crowd, loud and sharp, like a wave crashing. Eloise's face went white, her hands dropping to her sides, and Clarissa let out a small sound, like a sob she couldn't hold back. I kept going, looking straight at Eloise. "You've spent years acting like I was nothing, like I was just here to serve you, to bankroll your life while you smiled for the cameras. Well, I'm done. This," I waved my hand around the hall at the flowers, the lights, the whole damn wedding. "This is the last thing I'll ever give you without gratitude. Without respect." The words felt good, like a weight lifting off my shoulders, but they hurt too, cutting deep as they came out. I turned to Clarissa, softening my voice just a little. "And you, kid, I didn't do this to hurt you. I did it because I can't keep pretending I don't matter. You laughed tonight, went along with it, and maybe you didn't mean it to sting like it did. But it's time you saw me for real. I'm your father, not some shadow you can ignore." Her eyes were full of tears now, spilling over, but she didn't speak. Trevor reached for her hand, but she pulled it away, staring at me like she was lost. Eloise found her voice again, shrill and shaking. "You can't do this, Conrad. You can't just walk away and take everything." I looked at her, calm now, the anger settling into something colder, harder. "I can. And I will. I've got the papers, the receipts, the proof. You didn't want me in your life, not really. You wanted what I could give you. Now you'll see what it's like without it." The room was buzzing again, people whispering, some standing up, others craning their necks to see. I saw Maynard in the back, grinning like this was the best show he'd ever watched, and Trevor's parents huddled together, their faces tight with shock. I didn't care about any of them. This was between me and the two women who'd defined my life for 25 years. "I built this," I said, one last time, gesturing at the estate. "Not just the walls, but the life you've been living. And I'm taking it back, not out of spite, but because it's mine. Because I deserve something for me. I folded the papers, tucked them back into the envelope, and slipped it into my pocket. Eloise was shaking her head, muttering something I couldn't hear, her hands clenched into fists. Clarissa wiped her eyes, her voice small when she finally spoke. "Dad, please," but I shook my head. "I'm not doing this to punish you," I said. "I'm doing it to save myself." "You'll figure it out, Clarissa. You're smart. You always have been." I took a step back, then another, feeling the eyes on me, the weight of the moment. "Enjoy the rest of the night," I said, my voice quiet now, final. "It's all paid for. My last gift." Then I turned and walked toward the door, not the emergency exit, but the main one, the big double doors that led out into the night. The sound of my shoes on the floor echoed, steady and sure, and nobody stopped me. I didn't look back. Not once. I walked out of the Rosebridge Estate reception hall, the double doors swinging shut behind me with a soft thud, and the night air hit me like a cold slap. My name's Conrad Hale, and I just turned my life upside down, told Eloise I was filing for divorce, showed Clarissa and everyone else the truth about what I'd built, and left them all staring after me. The silence followed me like a shadow as I crossed the gravel lot to my truck, my old gray suit jacket flapping in the breeze. Nobody chased me, no voices called out, and I didn't expect them to. I'd said what I needed to say, and now I was done. I climbed into the driver's seat, the familiar creak of the springs under me, and started the engine. The headlights cut through the dark, lighting up the road ahead, and I drove off, leaving the wedding, the lights, the whole mess behind me. I didn't go home. Not to the house I'd shared with Eloise for 25 years, the one full of her furniture and her rules. Instead, I headed for the lakeside cabin I'd bought a few years back, a little place I'd fixed up myself when I needed to get away. It was an hour's drive, and I kept the radio off, just listening to the hum of the tires on the pavement, letting my thoughts settle. My hands were steady on the wheel, but my chest felt hollow, like I'd left something behind I couldn't name. When I got to the cabin, the moon was high, reflecting off the water in silver streaks. I parked, grabbed the duffel bag I'd packed that morning, just in case, and went inside. The place smelled like pine and dust, simple and quiet, nothing like the polished chaos of Rosebridge. I dropped the bag by the door, lit the old wood stove, and sat on the couch, a lumpy thing I'd found at a yard sale. For the first time in years, I slept without grinding my teeth, without that tight knot in my jaw I'd carried so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to let it go. The next morning, I made coffee on the stove, black and strong, and sat on the porch watching the lake ripple in the wind. My phone stayed off. I didn't want Eloise's calls, didn't want Clarissa's guilt, didn't want any of it. I'd spent decades tied to them, and now I was free, or at least starting to be. Over the next few weeks, I stayed at the cabin, working with my hands like I used to, fixing the dock, patching the roof, sanding down an old table I dragged out of the shed. It felt good, the ache in my muscles, the sweat on my back, like I was building something again, something just for me. I started calling up old friends, guys I hadn't seen in years because Eloise didn't like them, said they were too rough, too loud. There was Pete, who'd worked the warehouse with me back in the day, and Jimmy, who'd taught me how to fish when we were kids. We met up at a diner in town, the kind with sticky booths and coffee that tasted like tar, and they didn't ask about the wedding. They just slapped me on the back, handed me a beer, and talked about the old days, how we'd sneak out to the river with a six-pack, how Pete once fell in trying to impress a girl. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in I don't know how long. I drove to see my sister, Linda, too, out in the next county. She'd always hated Eloise, called her poison from the start, and when I told her what happened, she didn't say, "I told you so." She just hugged me, tight and quick, and made me a plate of her terrible meatloaf. "You're better off, Con," she said, her voice gruff but kind. Always were too good for her. I nodded, picking at the food, and felt a little lighter. Back at the cabin, I started sketching out plans, not for a house or a business, but for a life. I'd kept the estate, the company, all of it in my name, and the lawyer I called that first Monday said the divorce would be clean. Eloise wouldn't get much, not after I showed the papers proving what was mine. I didn't want revenge, though. I wanted peace. I fished off the dock some days, caught a few trout, cooked them over the fire. I read books I'd never had time for, old westerns and fishing guides, and let the days stretch out slow and quiet. The hollow in my chest started to fill, not with anger or regret, but with something new, myself, maybe, the guy I'd lost somewhere along the way. I didn't hear from Clarissa, not yet, and I didn't push. She'd reach out when she was ready, or she wouldn't. Either way, I'd done my part. I'd given her everything, and now I was giving myself something too. The cabin creaked at night, the wind whispering through the trees, and I slept deep, dreaming of nothing but the lake and the sky. A year had passed since I walked out of that wedding at Rosebridge Estate, and I was sitting on the porch of my lakeside cabin, the wood creaking under me as I sipped coffee from a chipped mug. My name's Conrad Hale, and I'd spent the last 12 months rebuilding, not a house or a business, but me. The divorce went through quick, cleaner than I'd expected, with Eloise getting the house and not much else. Everything I'd built, the estate, the company, stayed mine. She'd moved to Nevada with her sister, last I heard, and I didn't care enough to check. Life at the cabin was simple now, quiet, the way I liked it. I'd fixed up the place good, new shingles, a sturdier dock, even a little garden out back where I grew tomatoes and peppers. I was out there one morning, checking the plants, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Clarissa. I hadn't heard from her since that night. Not a call, not a text. And I'd let her be, figuring she'd come around when she was ready, or maybe never. I answered, my voice rough from not talking much lately. "Hey, kid," I said, and she was quiet for a second before she said, "Dad, can we meet? Just coffee or something." Her voice was small, different from the girl who'd told me not to ruin her wedding. I said yes, told her to pick a place, and an hour later I was sitting across from her in a diner near town, the kind with cracked vinyl seats and waitresses who called you Hon. She looked tired, thinner than I remembered, her hair pulled back messy. She didn't have her wedding ring on, and I didn't ask about Trevor right away. We ordered coffee, black for me, some sugary thing for her, and sat there, the silence heavy between us. "I'm sorry," she said finally, staring at her cup. "I didn't know, Dad. About the estate, the trust fund, any of it. I didn't see it." Her voice broke a little, and I nodded, slow, letting her talk. "You weren't meant to," I said, keeping it simple. "I made it easy to forget me. That's on me too." She looked up then, her eyes wet but not crying yet. "Mom's gone," she said. "She's in Nevada. And Trevor, we split up a few months ago. It didn't work." I didn't say anything, just waited, and she kept going. "I messed up that night. I should have stopped it, the MC, all of it. I didn't know what you'd done for me for us." I took a sip of coffee, the bitterness grounding me. "It's done, Clarissa. We can't undo it. But we can start over, if you want." She nodded, quick, like she'd been hoping I'd say that. And we talked, really talked, for the first time in years. Not about the wedding or the money, but about little things. The diner's pie, the weather, how she'd started a new job teaching kids art. It was careful, slow, but it was something. After that, she started coming to the cabin every month or so. She'd show up with a bag of groceries, sometimes just herself, and we'd sit by the lake, not saying much at first. Then one day, she brought a little girl with her, my granddaughter, Lily, 3 years old, with Clarissa's eyes and a shy smile. I didn't know about her before that. Didn't know Clarissa had kept her from Trevor's side quiet during the wedding mess. "This is your grandpa," Clarissa told her, and Lily hid behind her leg, peeking out at me. I knelt down, held out a hand, and she took it after a minute, her fingers tiny in mine. We started building something, the three of us, time, not stuff. I'd take Lily down to the dock, show her how to skip rocks, her little laughs bouncing across the water. Clarissa would watch, smiling sometimes, and I could see her letting go of whatever she'd carried from that night. One afternoon, we were inside, the rain tapping on the roof, and Lily was tugging at my sleeve, asking for a snack. Clarissa looked at me, her face softer than it had been in years, and said, "Dad, can you teach her how to fold napkins? The fancy way, like you used to?" I froze for a second, remembering that morning before the wedding, the stack of napkins I'd made for her big day, the ones nobody noticed. Then I smiled, real and warm. "Yeah," I said, grabbing a napkin from the drawer. "I think I can." I sat Lily on my lap, showed her how to fold the corners, her small hands fumbling, but trying. Clarissa watched, leaning against the counter, and for the first time, I felt like we were a family again, not the one I'd lost, but a new one, built on truth and time. The rain kept falling, and I kept folding, knowing this was enough.
Asterisk after listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind, or maybe it has brought back some old memories. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories, and they connect all of us. Everyone has their own unique journey in life, and we all try to understand the world in our own way. These kinds of moments remind us that we are all human, sometimes happy, sometimes sad, and always learning something new. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it with your friends. Your thoughts and feedback are always valuable to us, as they motivate us to create even better content. Every story has its own unique angle, and our goal is to understand everyone's perspective and make our content diverse and relatable. Stories like these help us realize that life's journey is different for everyone, and by hearing other stories, we learn something new. You can also share your own stories with us. Your experiences are valuable to us as well, and if you enjoyed this video, please leave your feedback. We aim to create content that brightens your mind and gives you new ideas every time. If you've already seen this video before, your feedback is still important. With every piece of feedback, we can improve our content and bring a new perspective to our viewers. Today, what we saw was just a small part of the many stories shared on Reddit and across the world. It's a reminder of how we all try to understand life by sharing our experiences with each other. This video was only an example of how we try to connect with others through storytelling, learning about different sides of life. We hope to continue sharing such stories that help us all learn and grow together. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon. If you haven't already, please like and follow for more amazing content. Your support keeps us going, and we will strive to bring you more thought-provoking and heartwarming stories. Until next time, take care and stay curious. **